This comes to the urgent question. Layla Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Foreign Secretary if he'll make a statement on the warrants and bounties issued against pro-democracy activists by Hong Kong National Security Police.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Foreign Secretary set out on Monday, in response to this latest egregious action in Hong Kong, we will not tolerate any attempts by the Chinese authorities to intimidate individuals in the UK. The UK will always defend the universal right to freedom of expression and stand up for those who are targeted simply for exercising that right. We strongly object to the national security law that China imposed on Hong Kong, including its extraterritorial reach, and we declared it a breach of the legally binding Sino-British Joint Declaration when Beijing imposed it on Hong Kong in 2020. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, that law has no jurisdiction here. In response to its imposition, the government acted quickly and decisively to suspend our extradition agreement with Hong Kong indefinitely. We introduced a bespoke immigration route for British nationals overseas status holders and their immediate family members, giving nearly 3 million people a path to British citizenship. We welcome the contribution this growing diaspora makes to life in the UK, as we welcome the contribution of the diaspora with links to mainland China. They are all safe to live here and exercise the same rights and freedoms, Mr. Speaker, that all UK residents enjoy. 3 years on from its imposition, we have seen how this opaque and sweeping law has undermined the liberties enshrined in the Sino-British Joint Declaration and indeed Hong Kong's own basic law. It has seen opposition stifled and dissent criminalised. Alternative voices across Hong Kong society have been all but extinguished, and changes to electoral rules have further eroded the ability of Hong Kong's people to be legitimately represented at all levels of government. Hong Kong's governance, rights and social systems are now closer to mainland norms. Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Secretary made plain our views on Hong Kong with Chinese Vice President Han Zheng on the 5th of May and at the UN Human Rights Council on the 27th of February. The Hong Kong authorities are busy trying to attract the world back to Hong Kong following years of political disruption and indeed COVID. And it is hard to see how this will be successful whilst they continue to pursue citizens who came out on the streets to do nothing more than protest peacefully to protect their rights. We call on Beijing to remove the national security law and for China and the Hong Kong authorities to end the targeting of those who stand up for freedom and democracy. We will continue to act as a convening power, bringing together our international partners to stand up for the people of Hong Kong, to call out violations of their rights and freedoms, and to hold China to its international obligations.
Yes. Layla Moran.
Fin Lau, Christopher Mung and Nathan Law. 3 incredibly brave individuals who stood up for democratic values while the Chinese Communist Party rode roughshod over them in Hong Kong. They sought refuge in the UK because they thought they would be safe. But chillingly, Beijing is trying to do all it can to interfere in what should be their safe haven. Now, the government has rightly said that they will not tolerate this intimidation. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid their words ring rather hollow. The danger to them on these shores feels all too present. We saw it in Southampton in May, we saw it in Manchester at the consulate last October, and we see it in the reported secret police stations. Now, Mr. Speaker, we need more than just condemnation, we need action. And most urgently, this means ensuring that these individuals are safe. Tragically, Finn and Christopher have said that they don't. They've asked for a meeting with the Foreign Secretary. Can we have confirmation that that will happen? Can the Minister clarify that it is illegal to bounty hunt in the UK and that the government will actively prosecute those who do? Does the Minister agree with Lord Patten that it is now time for those UK judges who still remain on the Hong Kong court a final appeal should resign over this? And will the government reconsider the Foreign Secretary's planned visit to Beijing in light of this blatant escalation by China of transnational repression? And finally, will the government at last take meaningful action against those involved in these warrants, as well as those who are intent on snuffing out the flame of democracy in Hong Kong? It is staggering that after everything that's happened, we are yet to sanction a single individual. Our allies acted years ago. We have existing obligations under the Joint Declaration, and yet too often this Conservative government chooses constructive ambiguity rather than firm lines. what's clear on all sides of this House that it's time for that to change.
Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know the House will understand that, as a matter of long-standing policy, of course, we don't comment on the detail of operational matters, and colleagues will, I hope, understand that any risk of compromising the integrity of arrangements for security for those who are here and in the UK, for whom we, as I say, will continue to afford them the opportunity for that freedom of speech and expression, is the one that we continue to do. Discussions are ongoing, but I am not able at the moment to give more details, but I hope the Honourable Lady will understand that, and I am in regular contact, as are officials, with the Security Minister and the Home Office on this matter. In relation to the question of judges, of course, they are private citizens, and we therefore must allow them to reach their own decision in that particular situation. But as I say, Mr. Speaker, and I will repeat as many times as anyone wishes me to, I think all of us in this House and everyone in the UK is very clear that the UK will not tolerate any attempts to intimidate or silence individuals here on UK soil, and we will do all we can to ensure their safety.
To the Select Committee, Alicia Katz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bounties placed on the heads of those fleeing Chinese Communist Party repression and autocracy are not just outrageous, but a blatant violation of international law, and also expose the lies of Xi Jinping when he says that he is respecting freedoms within Hong Kong. We must take a stand against transnational oppression to protect British nationals, but also those seeking refuge in the UK. Only last week I wrote to HSBC to argue against the fact that they are appallingly denying access to Hong Kong's to their own pensions. But my question today is, given that 3 people seeking refuge in the UK have now had bounties put on their head, has the Foreign Secretary or my right honourable friend called in the Chinese ambassador this week in response to it? And if not, why not?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wholeheartedly agree with my honourable friend, the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that these bounties are extraterritorial and therefore have no rights or legitimacy here, but indeed that we must ensure, as I have stated already, that ability to protect and to allow always the voices of those who are here with us to maintain that freedom of expression. We speak regularly with Chinese colleagues. In fact, I had meetings just a few weeks ago with one of the visiting members of the Economic Secretary and raised these issues. Obviously, that was before this particular bounty was raised, but we will continue to work closely and indeed with the MC on a number of matters, including this one.
Shadow Minister Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And could I congratulate the Honourable Member for Oxford West and Abingdon for bringing forward this important question today. The issuing of these arrest warrants is a further repressive step by the Hong Kong government. The national security law under which these warrants have been issued is in itself a serious breach of the legally binding Sino-British agreement that set the terms for governing Hong Kong until 2047. Beijing's attempts to bully and intimidate those who have already fled, growing repression in Hong Kong, is a symbol of the Chinese government's attempt to stifle any further dissent and undermine basic freedoms in the territory. It deserves clear and unified condemnation, and it's pleasing to see so many in the House today doing that. Given 3 of the 8 named individuals are based here in the UK, this move by the authorities in Hong Kong will further compound the very real fears held by the British-based Hong Kong community that they're still not free of the long arm of Chinese state repression. We should be proud of the UK's role in welcoming people here from Hong Kong to all of our communities. We cannot tolerate efforts to harass or intimidate those who have come to the UK, fleeing political persecution. The Minister will know that protections for Hong Kongers have been raised by Labour repeatedly, and the Foreign Secretary's dismissive response at the last FCDO orals was simply not good enough. Could I repeat the question that the member for Rutland asked, which was, has she met today, or does she intend to meet today, a representative of the Chinese government here in the UK to underline the feelings in this Parliament? Secondly, will she reassess whether it is in order for there to be sanctions placed on leading members of the Hong Kong government? And thirdly, will she live up to our moral and legal obligations to Hong Kongers, both here in the UK and Hong Kong itself, and as a government grow a backbone?
Hear, hear. Well said.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I think we all agree in this House very clearly, any attempt by any foreign power to intimidate, harass or indeed harm individuals or our community in the UK will not be tolerated. This is an insidious threat to our democracy and to those fundamental human rights which the UK always stands up for across the world. As I say, Home Office officials work very closely with the FCDO and indeed other government departments to ensure that the UK is and can continue to be a safe and welcoming place for those who choose to settle here. And of course, as I said in my statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, the BNO route is now available to up to 3 million. I think the numbers might be not entirely correct. Around 160,000 have so far taken up the opportunity, and that door is very much open for those that do. Madam Deputy Speaker, I might just highlight that the Security Minister directed the Defending Democracy Task Force to review the UK's approach to transnational repression to ensure that we have the most robust and joined-up response both across government and with law enforcement should we sadly need to make use of it.
Tim Lawton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Extending bounties and arrest warrants to people legally in this country who have escaped Hong Kong is a particularly chilling extension of the Chinese Communist Party's tentacles across sovereign borders. But frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, tough words need to be followed by tough actions. And just saying we will not tolerate this, or we will say we will not tolerate this again, is no deterrent. Will she now admit that her sitting down with Lau Jinchao, the head of the International Liaison Department of the Chinese government, the chief dissident snatcher who will have a role in the issuing of these warrants, with her being photographed sitting next to him smiling along with 5 other honourable members of this House, was a bad idea, sends out entirely the wrong messages to the Chinese government, which is why they think they can get away with it. When are we going to see some real sanctions, some real calling back of judges, some real implications of what China is going to do, rather than tough words that mean nothing?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Foreign Secretary set out in his speech recently on China, we consider it important to engage with our Chinese counterparts where appropriate to protect UK interests and to build those relationships. I, therefore, was comfortable sitting down when Liu Jingzhao visited at the invitation of the Great British China Council for a political dialogue, because we believe it's important, I believe personally it's important, to have conversations with those where in every diplomatic relationship being frank is only possible if you are in the room together. And colleagues will be aware that I was extremely frank with the gentleman in question, and he was able to hear directly from an FCDO minister exactly what the many concerns we have around MPs who are sanctioned, around the issues, these Hong Kong issues which are discussing today and others were raised. And we consider that to be an important way to maintain the conversation. This latest very, very worrying situation around bounties is one that not only, most importantly, we want to ensure the safety and security and the freedom of expression of those who choose to be here, so that they are able to express their views clearly on these matters. And as colleagues know, we declared that when the national security law was brought in, that was a breach of the Sino-British Declaration, and we continue to raise those issues to see if that can be resumed, but we don't feel very confident at the moment.
SNP spokesperson Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Using the Chinese national security law, authorities are seeking to prosecute critics of Hong Kong anywhere in the world. Extraterritorial warrants with outrageous bounties have now been issued for 8 pro-democracy activists, former lawmakers and legal scholars who've been attacked for speaking out against China's actions and campaigning for sanctions. At least 3 are known to live in the UK, but if caught, they could face life sentences in China. I welcome the government's suspension of its extradition treaty with Hong Kong, But after the incidents in Manchester and Southampton, how can these pro-democracy activists be protected? What actions are the government taking to break up the secret police units across the UK? And with China having broken every single commitment and guarantee to Hong Kong, what action is the government going to actually take against China?
Here. Madam Deputy Speaker, as I've said, and I'm happy to reiterate, and colleagues quite rightly have concerns for the safety of those on British soil who are here, and we provide them that freedom of expression. I will not discuss at the moment operational matters that are ongoing, but the FCDO and the Home Office are working very closely together and will continue to do so in these matters.
Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm extremely disturbed to hear that HMRC is passing on details of new bank accounts that are opened by Chinese and Hong Kongers in the UK to the Chinese government as part of money laundering efforts. Will my right honourable friend please work with the Treasury to make sure that this loophole isn't exploited by the Chinese government, putting exposed Chinese and Hong Kongers here in the UK in danger?
Madam Speaker, I will be pleased to catch up with my honourable friend after this urgent question to discuss it more fully, and absolutely I will take that up with urgency.
Barry Sherman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there is a clear and present danger from the Chinese government, not just to the citizens of Hong Kong, but the citizens here in the United Kingdom. And isn't it about time that we realise that the pernicious influence of China on this country, on Europe, and isn't it about time we took sanctions against them? They have so many investments in this country, they have so much influence in this country. Isn't it about time that we looked at really rugged sanctions? That's the only thing they'll listen to. When will the government act?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as colleagues know, we do not discuss potential future sanctions, as of course they could reduce their ability to have the impact we wish them to.
Raymond Chisty.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister said the United Kingdom will not tolerate these latest egregious acts, that this is a real threat to human rights. I know the Minister is saying the United Kingdom will not, and the Minister will not look at what future potential sanctions may be, but having been a former Foreign Office Sanctions Minister, can I ask the Minister this specific question? What the Minister can do, looking at the will of Parliament, is ask the sanctions team to look at the criteria that this Parliament has passed, look at what the Minister has just said about real threat to human rights, and to see if that criteria has met, and update the House within the next 14 days.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's always nice to have the chance to discuss sanctions with a fellow and former sanctions minister. It's one of the most extraordinarily complex but impactful tools that the FCDO has to make clear the UK's views and direction. And I will happily take my honourable friend's comments away, but as I say, we will. The work is constant and ongoing. In fact, we've more than doubled the team in the last year in the Sanctions Directorate, but we won't discuss in anticipation any new sanctions that might be brought forward.
Vera Hophouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister tell the House what discussions she has had with the US and Australia about coordinating an Interpol early warning system to protect pro-democracy activists overseas?
Madam Deputy Speaker, officials have regular conversations with allies and partners around the world and working with Interpol to ensure that those rules that need to be maintained are, and of course to ensure that we can use the international powers to protect those, as I say, here from those extraterritorial reach.
Fiona Bruce.
This recent development is yet another example of China's outrageous disregard of fundamental human rights and freedoms, and one can hardly imagine how the decent, honourable and brave young man Nathan Law is feeling now, a young man I had the privilege of meeting in this place. He needs to know, and others affected need to know, that we are doing everything we can to defend their freedoms, and I'm sure our like-minded international partners feel the same.
So what is the UK doing to show leadership following this announcement and to work with our international partners to stand up for the people of Hong Kong and call out this particular violation of their rights and freedoms and to hold China to its international obligations?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Honourable Lady is always a champion and a strong voice, and I thank her for the support she is giving to those who are feeling under great strain. Some of the challenges that remain, of course, we suspended our extradition agreement with Hong Kong in July 2020, but there are 13 countries who have still not done so. Hong Kong, despite the national security law being brought in, including 2 European ones, Czech Republic and Portugal, and indeed 11 others, including countries like Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, South Korea and India. So we continue to work closely with them to ask them to reconsider their position to ensure that those who need to be able to maintain their freedom of expression in their countries are able to do so safely.
Speaker, my constituent Carlos A. Young has written to me about this and the significant distress and fear within the Hong Konger community about exerting of extraterritorial enforcement on British soil, and saying that this requires immediate attention and action. Now, I listened very carefully when the Minister answered my honourable friend on the front bench and the Chair of the Select Committee, who both called for her to meet with representatives of the Chinese embassy here in London, to call them into the Foreign Office to address them down about this matter, and she just did not answer their question. So can she answer that now so the House can be better informed?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary has meetings with many during the week, and I will take away, and I'm sure the message in the Department will have heard of the importance of these matters, and we will continue to have those ongoing discussions, but importantly also, as colleagues have said, to ensure that these concerns, which are so clearly heard, rightly so, will be featured because we will be publishing our annual human rights report. I want to say next week, but I think the correct term is imminently, just in case the printers don't work on time, in which China sadly will have a featuring part.
Andy Carter.
Deputy Speaker, I had the privilege of meeting members of Hong Kong Watch last Thursday, including representatives from the 3,000 recently arrived BNOs that have come to settle in Warrington. What was very clear was the fear that they have for family members, often elderly family members, that they've left behind in Hong Kong. And of course, they are now unable to return to see many of those family members. I asked the Minister to assure the House that she will continue to push for progress on human rights issues in China, and particularly in Hong Kong, including rights to freedom of expression. Can she give that message to members of the BNO community in Warrington?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's heartening to know that colleagues from across the House are so closely involved with the BNOs who are coming to the UK to make their new homes, and I thank him for his commitment to that, and I can absolutely give him the FCGO and this government will continue to make clear our disagreement, in fact our shocking objection to the national security law and the impact it's having on freedoms.
Kirsten Oswald.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is clearly a dangerous escalation in Beijing's global war on dissent. I wonder if the Minister is able to confirm that it is actually illegal to issue and pursue bounties in the UK, and confirm that the UK Government will be actively seeking the prosecution of anyone who aims to take these up. I also wonder if the Minister is able to confirm what the thinking is of the UK Government in relation to targeted financial sanctions of those in government in Hong Kong, something that she has been less than clear about in this session, I feel, and similarly it is concerning that she has been less than clear about what her intentions are in terms of meeting officials and conveying the deep unhappiness of members in this House and the significant concern we have for Hong Kongers in the UK.
Here.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can confirm, of course, that these extra national bounties have no validity here. We have no extradition treaty with Hong Kong because we have suspended it indefinitely, and therefore there is no reach to those people here. And any attempt by any foreign power to intimidate, harass or harm individuals in the UK will not be tolerated. As I say, the Security Minister is working through the Defending Democracy Task Force to review our approach and indeed to ensure that we have all the robust tools that we need to protect those who are here.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Only just last week I met with a constituent in Keighley who was deeply concerned about the eroding of democracy in Hong Kong. So will the Minister assure me and the House that the UK will always defend the universal right to freedom of expression and stand up for those who are targeted in Hong Kong and around the world by China?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I can give him that absolute assurance. And indeed, I hope that when the Human Rights Report is published shortly, there will be clarity for all those who wish to do so to see just how clearly the UK takes its obligations.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, bounties for people is the stuff of films, not the stuff of real life in this United Kingdom. It has become the normal, the despicable behaviour of the Chinese Communist Party for those who dare to have dissent from their thought and to request freedom and liberty. The world are united alongside those from Hong Kong who espouse and wish to have this free expression. What further steps can the House and our government and our City of State take to support those who live in the United Kingdom and whom we have a moral obligation to speak up for and not to be silent? Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we continue to call on Beijing to remove the national security law and indeed for the Hong Kong authorities to end their targeting of those who stand up for freedom and democracy in country, and this terrible step that we've seen this week will simply continue to ensure that we absolutely categorically make clear through the engagement that we have in the UK and across our international partnerships that we all stand for freedom of speech and expression for all those citizens across Hong Kong.